Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. I'm your host, Usama, and today we're very honored to be joined by Mr. Mudassar Aqil, who's the president and CEO of Easypaisa, which is a part of Telenor Microfinance Bank, and they're definitely revolutionizing the digital payment systems in Pakistan. So, with that, let's get started. Mudassar, first of all, we formally welcome you to the show. And how has your day been so far?
Thank you, Sama. Good to be here, and day is going good, and looking forward to a good conversation with you.
Right. So we'll get started, first of all, by asking you to provide us with an elevator pitch about your professional journey and how did your decision making really help you in reaching where you are today?
Osama, my professional journey started about 25 years ago after I finished my MBA in the US, and I started as part of a management training program with a commercial bank in the US. I stayed with them for 8 years and did reasonably well. I was part of the middle management in about 8 years' time. And then just a turn of events and some lucky encounters brought me to Pakistan. I was here
Hmm.
for holiday, and I ran into the CEO of a commercial bank, and they, you know, were impressed with the work that I was doing in the US, and they offered me a
Hmm.
position here. And the lure of being close to my parents and young family that I had
Hmm.
brought me back to Pakistan, and it's been 17 years since then. And I've gone through another two organizations. I was with Bank Al Falah, then I joined Finca
Hmm.
Microfinance Bank as their CEO. I was there for 8 years, and now I've been with Easypaisa Telenor Bank for 3 years. Um,
Right.
so I think if you were to say that, what decisions led me to where I am, I would say that there is no specific decision per se except for one. And
Hmm.
that, it's not so much of a decision, it's more of a, you can say, you know, my style of thinking or my mindset or the way I
Hmm.
work is really the task at hand. Whatever you have in front of you, how can you improve it every single day, right?
Right.
And then when you incrementally start saying, okay, how can by whatever we are doing, how can we do it better every
Hmm.
single day, it automatically leads to new ideas, new thinkings, new initiatives. And then
Right.
once you start going down that path, one
Hmm.
benefit is that you're pursuing your ideas. That's something that you are passionate about. And then secondly, it eventually, at least in my case, it gives you the freedom of sort of like creating your own job description. And
Right.
because ultimately you're trying to solve some problems, and if you're solving problems for the organization, you're creating value for the organization. And if
Right.
you're creating value for the organization, promotions and money is a byproduct that comes with it, is sort of how it worked out.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, there is, people say that I have a 5-year vision or a 10-year vision. I frankly
Yeah.
never had much of a long-term view, except for,
Uh,
really passionate about what I'm doing today and what are some of the
right.
problems that I want to solve and some of the things that I find really exciting. And I was
Right.
always fortunate to work for bosses who gave me that space early on.
Hmm.
I was willing to go extra mile. I was willing to take on difficult assignments that yeah, and solve difficult problems. And I think
Right.
that has really worked well for me in a nutshell.
So, other than that, if we were to, let's say, strip down the title of a CEO of all the marketing buzz that it has right now, so let's say if someone were to be appointed as a chief executive of, let's say, a large scale organization. So, first of all, what is their responsibilities as a leader of that company, and what are the general expectations from the role?
Look, the responsibility, as they say, that the buck stops here. So it's the the CEO is ultimately responsible for everything that goes in the organization, regardless if it's bad or good, right? So
Right.
a chief executive officer
Mm-hmm.
is 100% responsible for what is happening in the organization. And then it has,
Right.
in a broad sense, the way I define it, I would say that he or she is responsible to three stakeholders also. In some
Mm-hmm.
organizations, there are more than three, but I think these three are common regardless of the kind of work you're doing.
Okay.
One is the owners of the organization. So whatever the business is, I mean, if somebody
Mm-hmm.
owns it, the investors or the
Yeah.
shareholders who have invested money in it, be it
Mm-hmm.
if it's a public company or a private company, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second would be the users who benefit from the work or the service or the product that the company produces. So
Mm-hmm.
you're responsible to the customers. And then the third
Mm-hmm.
one would be the overall community in which you operate, right? So the
Right.
you have a obligation and responsibility to the community also to do good for the community. So you can't be doing business and exploiting the community in which you operate. So I think these are the
Right.
three core, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, things that I think are applicable to majority of the businesses. In case of non-profit organizations, obviously uh, there are no shareholders,
Yeah.
but there is the set of users or the beneficiaries are there, and the sense of obligation or delivery to the overall community is even more stronger.
Right.
So I would this is how I would define it.
So as far as I'm okay, so I'm very curious to get a perspective from a leader like you that when it comes to hiring, what is something that we should see in a potential applicant? So, for example, the core of my question is that let's say if we are to set up a team that not only delivers on the promise and delivers results, but is also fun to work with. And on the other side, I mean, if someone's a smart cookie, it's easier to bet on them. But for someone who has a lot of ambition, but they might not fill in 100% of the criteria. So when it comes to hiring, what would be something that you would look for in a potential candidate?
Look, I mean, so obviously, as part of my job, I have, and over the last 25 years, I have hired a lot of people, and I still do.
Hmm.
And if I have to give you a broad perspective, one of the things that I rank very highly is that what's the energy level of the individual, right? So the if
Hmm.
and how much passion or energy is in the individual is very, very important, because
Right.
um, jobs today are very fluid. So
Yeah.
the business is dynamic, the world is dynamic. So you want people
Hmm.
who are really adaptable and have a lot of energy and passion to actually solve problems
Yeah.
and go above and beyond sometimes, and outside the box to figure things out. So
Hmm.
that's an important aspect that I look for. The second is that I want to get a sense of their value system also, right? So I mean,
Right.
there are things that you can figure out by speaking to people and also looking at their resume,
Yeah.
that gives you some sense of that, is this person driven by just money or titles, or is there is a bigger there's something more deeper to this individual, and how is the sense of value in terms of their ethics and integrity. You want to get a sense of that
Right.
also. And
Right.
then I would say the third thing that I find very
Hmm.
important is clarity of thinking, right? So you don't have to have you don't need to know uh, everything about everything, in terms of the technical skills. I
Yeah.
mean, those can be acquired,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
if you have an organized mind in which you can analyze the problem, or you break it down into parts, and then think through it clearly and then articulate your thoughts. I think that is important. So
Right.
those are the things that I find are pretty critical as a common element. And then depends on what you're recruiting for.
Hmm.
Some positions are very technical in nature, so uh,
Yeah.
even if these three things are present and the technical skill set is not there, then obviously you in many cases that's not a good fit. But many
Right.
early career people, where majority of the learning takes place at work. I think these are very important elements that I look at.
Right. Perfect. And other than that, first of all, what is your source of motivation? And I mean, what keeps you interested in the position that you're in right now, considering that it is a stressful position nonetheless, because whatever happens, whatever good or bad happens, it gets reflected on a CEO no matter what. So, what keeps you interested in being in this kind of leadership position?
I think personally, the things which are important to me are what impact can my work have,
Hmm.
to the communities that we serve or to the broader world. So
Right.
we all want to be part of something which is bigger than us. So
Correct.
you want
Yeah.
to. There has to be a purpose to the work that you're doing. So that's very important for me.
Hmm.
And then after that is there has to be uh, challenge or some space to improve, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
if there is room for improvement, if there are things you can, you can innovate and try to do something different, improve productivity, efficiency, benefit, user value. Um, that's
Hmm.
what keeps me interested and motivated. So those would be the two things
Yeah.
that I would highlight.
Perfect. And Mudassar, in terms of career strategy, so for early career professionals, what should they be start doing more of, or what should be their focal point in their initial years at a certain company, to eventually, let's say, a decade after, should land them in an executive management role?
Look, I mean, I can tell you from based on my experience, and I see a lot of resumes where people have switched jobs every other year almost, right? So in a 10,
Hmm.
15 year career, I see people sometimes who have worked at 7, 8
Yeah.
organizations, right?
Right.
In my 25 years, I've only worked at 3 organizations. So I've
Mm.
always um, look for challenges wherever I am, and trying to and try to solve those problems. And I've been just busy doing that, and I don't know where the time went. So
Right.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
and in many ways it has worked to my advantage,
Hmm.
because if you give yourself time with an organization, uh, the opportunities come your way. But if you're impatient, and if you're thinking, I've been here 1 year and somebody else is willing to give me more money and somebody can give me a bigger title, in the
Hmm.
short run I think there is a benefit, but
Hmm.
I don't think it really works out in the long run, because
Right.
in the life of most of the organizations, opportunities come, and they are taken by only those people who are present,
Right.
and those people who are present have established themselves and established trust,
Hmm.
uh, with
Yeah.
the management or the owners of that organization, are the one who then get those prized assignments and new opportunities.
Yeah.
So a lot of time,
Right.
young people have this mindset when they enter an organization that, what can this organization do for me? And I think you should really
Right.
start thinking about, once you get yourself in the door, through the door, is what can
Hmm.
I do for this organization? How do I add value, right? And
Right.
the
Right.
one simple way to do this is that you always prove yourself worthy for bigger responsibility, right? So it's
Right.
as simple as that. So whatever you're doing, you
Yeah.
need to demonstrate that I can do more than I am capable of doing
Mm-hmm.
more. I can be
Yeah.
trusted to do more. And when you get
Right.
that bigger responsibility, everything else follows. A lot of time, people are thinking that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the door now. I'm in this organization. Let's say if it's a large organization, and now they immediately start networking within the organization,
Yeah.
or start
Yeah.
looking for jobs internally and start posting for jobs without excelling in the job that they have right now. So
Right.
I tell people is, do a stellar job that is given to you first. That's the first step.
Right.
When Once you do that, then
Yeah.
other things will become open to you. But if you're not really taking interest in what you have right now, but you are trying to go
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere, I mean, nobody's going to be excited about giving you those prize assignments. So
Yeah.
my view is that, change
Yeah.
employment if you think challenge is gone, if you think there's no hope left in the
Right.
existing organization. But otherwise,
Yeah.
try to really focus on creating, value for the organization where you
Right.
are.
So, I mean, these lateral moves should be very need based. They should not be out of spite that just because everybody else is doing it, we should do it too. Unless, there's a need, then I believe, you should stick to it. And as you rightly mentioned that, you should find something that you can solve and add business value. Other than that, Mudassar, again, as being a CEO, what do you think should be a valid or a relevant metric or gauge to assess the success of an executive like that of a CEO?
I think that's a tricky question, right? So there are many KPIs. The typical ones are,
Yeah,
the return to the shareholders,
shareholders
return on
may.
equity, market
Yeah.
share, profitability. I mean, obviously all the obvious things are there. But I
Hmm.
think the impact on the industry can be one. Uh, I mean, a lot of
Right.
many times the real measure of the performance comes after the CEO is gone. In many ways, I mean, how the
Uh huh.
organization is faring in the long run. So I think
Right.
it's multifaceted, really. But
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's
I think it's
interesting.
a very complex
But
question. I've given you a very basic answer, but
yeah.
it's many sides to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, other than the typical answer of shareholders, at least there's something else to think about, that it's really the legacy that you're going to leave behind, that, where did you put the company while you were in charge, and then once your successor comes over, then I think how, I would say, smooth things are for them. I think that might be another relevant factor of that assessment. But other than that, once you took charge, what myths do you think have been busted for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I can't specifically think about, what was I thinking before. But I
Mm-hmm.
think a big part of what's hidden from the world is, as part of a CEO's life, is a lot of the time goes into a lot of governance related issues, right? So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
the how an organization is is run. There's a big part of it is in your relationship with the board and how the board governs the organization. The management manages, the board governs, right? So the governance part is
Right.
usually is not very visible to the rest of the world, but it's very
Mm-hmm.
very critical. And a big part of CEO's role is managing that relationship with the board,
Right.
and ensuring that the governance framework is working to the satisfaction of the shareholders and the board. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other part is the importance of culture, which is a lot of time is a lot of people talk about it but not really fully understood. And I think that you know putting a stamp on the culture and setting it right is again another thing which probably I didn't appreciate as much the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, as compared to after being in this role. And then the last one would be that, to the outside world, it seems like it's a very powerful position,
Yeah.
actually, it can be somewhat of a lonely experience also, because
Yeah.
you have to really, the only way you can achieve anything is by motivating people and extracting the best out of them, right? So I mean, you can't really
Right.
just sit and tell people what to do and they will do it. Most of
Yeah.
the best work that people give is their discretionary effort, is not really mandatory work. So to tap into people's discretionary effort requires winning people's hearts, showing them
Yeah.
purpose,
Yeah.
creating a great culture.
Yeah.
So all of those things are, but you don't really know until you have this responsibility.
So speaking about culture, but there's a do you guys have any cool traditions at Easypaisa?
By tradition, if you mean things that are done ritualistically, I can't think of anything which is unique from a ritual standpoint. But we've got a
Mm-hmm.
pretty. We try to inculcate a non-hierarchical, sort of like an open culture. We have open
Nice.
seating plan.
Right.
And people have the ability, and they're encouraged to openly express who they are, bring their whole self to
Right.
work, and open
Mm-hmm.
lines of communication. And then uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of quick decision making and
Mm-hmm.
rapid execution. Uh, in our job, in our industry, fintech is a technology business,
Mm-hmm.
fast-paced decisions, fast-paced execution. So that's the kind of
Mm-hmm.
culture we have, where and then lots of open communication. So where I every other month almost, I have employee town halls, and then in between also very frequent meetings
Mm-hmm.
where everyone is invited, vertically or horizontally. We spend a
Right.
lot of time communicating what we're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
then once a month we take a stock of, in terms of how things are going, get everyone.
Yeah.
We have a multiple groups of people. So we have like almost 150 people that we call the 150 top managers in the organization, that
Right.
we communicate very closely with. There's a separate WhatsApp group through which we all sort of like informally share interesting information with each other. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
emphasis on communication. If I were to put my finger on one thing, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is important and probably makes us somewhat different from a traditional organization.
Right. No, definitely. And one of the best things about this inclusive culture is that as human beings, I've felt that once you're around someone, then you have a sense of a belonging there, that, they're human beings too. I mean, again, a CEO didn't come out of Mars, right? They're human beings like you. It's just that they're ahead in their career. But I mean, as far as, they can bring that positive energy at work, it can definitely inspire a lot more people, to work towards the same goal, thinking that they can achieve that just like their ancestor did. So now switching the conversation a little bit about, I would say, academic side of things, is that I wanted to ask you that now that we are seeing a lot more technical executives who have, let's say, PhDs, who have a very solid technical background, but in your opinion, what would be the best way for them to upskill in terms of acquiring a strong business acumen and maybe understanding the financials of a large scale organization?
Well, I think the look the for a senior managerial responsibility, I think it's important for people to understand, you know, financial reports of their organization or of any organization, right? So I
Hmm.
think the basic financial know-how is very important, um,
Hmm.
and how to read a balance sheet, how to read, account
Yeah.
statements, P&L, those kind of things, how budgets work, stuff like that. So um,
Right.
technical people would also be served well. They don't have to and get an MBA to do this. This is fairly simple. And there
Right.
are now some very good online resources available, where these kind of courses can be done online very effectively. And in some ways, I think they're very well designed. I had the opportunity some time ago to, as a refresher, attend a small online program like that, and I was just
Hmm.
pleasantly surprised at how well designed and how effective it can be. So I think
Right.
yes, from a broad perspective, I think finance is an important information or skill or knowledge that every manager at some point will have to have. And then obviously, I think the world is now moving in the direction of more specialization and not so much about generalists.
Right.
So you go deeper into an area of expertise, and then
Hmm.
and that sort of becomes your niche, and then the basic skills of understanding financial books and uh, understanding how to manage a team, uh, and
Right.
so basic management things can be learned later on. They're not very complicated.
Right. And
But
yeah.
again, as I
Mhm.
said in the
Mhm.
very beginning, that
Yeah.
clarity of thought is very, very important.
Right. And maybe you've partly answered my other question in the series was really about MBA. Like I've seen most of the leaders at these big companies, if there's one thing in common, all of them have MBAs, and most of the aspiring or ambitious people who want to join executive management, they really prefer to get an MBA as well. So, what is it about MBA that really brings so much value to them? And maybe the other part of the question can be that how do you get the maximum value out of an MBA? I mean, it's not like any other university degree that you just go do the courses and you're done, but it's really about that community interaction with the community over there. Because let's say if you are at Harvard, you're joined by other executives, and eventually they're going to be leaders just like yourself. So, how to get the maximum value out of an MBA?
Well, I think all good business schools in the world require some real world experience before they will admit you to an MBA program. So
Hmm.
if you're going after a few years of work experience, I think an MBA has a lot of value. And
Okay.
if that's the career track you want to pursue, then it adds a lot
Hmm.
of value, right? Because it's 2 years of your life. And
Yeah.
if for instance, if you're an engineer
Hmm.
and you want to do research for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
then you may not need the entire MBA degree. You may just need parts of it that can be acquired separately rather than uh, putting your
Hmm.
life on hold for 2 years. But if management is your aspiration,
Yeah.
I think MBA from a good business school after working for a few years
Hmm.
adds value. But if you
Right.
go from getting a bachelor's and straight into an MBA program, I don't really see a lot of value in that.
Right, makes sense. And if we are to formally uh, talk about core values, what are some of the core values that you really uphold in your life and in your professional life as well?
I think it would be first and foremost is transparency. It would be one which is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So when you
Mm-hmm.
run things very transparently,
Mm-hmm.
um, then I think it builds trust. Everyone knows that what you're seeing is what there is, and there is nothing else. There's no hidden agenda. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
then open communication would be the other important part that goes hand in glove with transparency.
Right.
Um, and then I would also the other thing that I emphasize a lot is that I call it that help each other succeed. So you have to be a net giver, not a net taker, uh,
Mm-hmm.
to this world, right? So
Right.
if your mindset is that I will give less and take more, I think you're going against the law of nature. I mean,
Right.
the nature
Yeah.
also operates on a principle of abundance. So
Mm-hmm.
you plant a seed and you get like a tree out of it. You
Yeah.
get more, you give less. So
Right.
I aspire that if you want to do good, just do it. Just do it uh, out of that. This is my core value. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in abundance. I believe in sharing,
Right. Mm-hmm.
um, and don't do it as a transactional, uh, you know,
Yeah.
mindset where if I do this, then what would I get back in return? Um,
Right.
and then just be kind to people, right? I mean, so it's if you have to make a mistake where
Mm-hmm.
people decisions are involved. I'd like to take a path where if I want to, if I make a mistake, I want to err on the side of where somebody might get an extra benefit rather than extra harm. um,
Right.
because these are difficult decisions when people are involved.
Yeah.
So be a little generous, be a little more kind-hearted. So those are
Right.
the basic principles,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody who sort of like, maybe I'm forgetting one or two, but
Mm-hmm.
if people break any of these principles, it's very difficult for me to trust them and work with them, right? Because these are the core things
Right.
which I think are very important. That people are transparent, they're trustworthy, their integrity, character is in place. They help
Right.
each other. They build transparency,
Mm-hmm.
build trust. Um, and then the
Yeah.
other thing is not so much of a value, but more of a, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, mindset is that you have to continuously, you have to continue learning your whole life, right? The world that we live
Yeah.
in,
It never
uh,
stops.
it,
Yeah.
it just never stops, right? So
Yeah.
be a learning individual, somebody who's willing to grow and to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise humilities. We are all
Yeah.
essentially are at various levels uh, exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where we
Yeah.
are in the world, what race, what gender, whatever, humans are going through a very similar struggle at so many different levels. So show some empathy for
Right.
people. Connect with them at a human level. That's sort of what my value
Absolutely.
system.
Absolutely. Perfect. And if we were to extend the topic of learning a little bit, so being in tech is like being in a very dynamic environment that just changes every now and then, and you really have to be on top of your game. So, in your opinion, what is the best way of staying in the game of these changing trends in technology?
I think there's just so many resources now available because of the internet. So,
Yeah.
become part of, interest groups, be on, LinkedIn and all these other social media platforms, Twitter, whatnot. Follow thought leaders in the subject that interests you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there are so many trade publications, so many now. Uh, I mean, this whole space is really disintermediated now.
Yeah.
There are people who, who are on platforms like Substack, where they're writing their own newsletters that you can
Right.
subscribe to. You can follow people on Twitter. You can just read books.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there are so many opportunities now for you to continue uh, learning the latest work being done in whatever your professional field may be. So, and I think
Right.
that just shows, uh, you know. A curious mind is a learning mind,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, if you stay
Right.
curious and you continue learning, there are just unlimited resources available in the world. But at the
Great.
same time,
Yeah.
I tend to also encourage people to then bring, whatever you're learning, bring a part of it back to your
Mm-hmm.
job and try to apply it to something that you're doing also, right? So a lot of time,
Right.
people become the simple, academic, sponges of just, gathering all of this information, but not really applying any of this to what they're doing. So I'm saying, okay, I mean, a lot of it is really learn all of these things and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what can I bring back to my work, and then how can I do it, 5% better. Um, and I
Right.
think that's really the where the rubber meets the road. So that's the other thing that I highly encourage.
Right, perfect. And Mudassar, I want to ask your opinion on failures. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur slash a leader of a company, as much as we want to accumulate successes, it's very natural that we might be faced with setbacks or where things don't really go as planned. So, in your opinion, what should be the most appropriate way of dealing with failures?
Leadership matters when things go wrong, right? So
Mm-hmm.
have the moral courage to accept uh, the ownership of mistakes or failures,
Right.
right? I mean, I think that's very, very important. It's difficult. And a lot of time it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
So, so I think one important thing is to openly talk about failures. I think in any culture, it's very, very important. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that when you make a mistake, you raise your hand and say,
Yeah.
this actually something has gone wrong, and here's how I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to fix it, and
Right.
here's my plan to put this back on track. And
Right.
if you are going to sugarcoat it, if you're not going to talk about it, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
come back to haunt you, and it's going to come back and haunt your organization also, because those failures then trigger bigger problems down the road if they are not openly
Absolutely.
discussed and talked about. So I think that's my philosophy on that.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done. A lot of
Hmm.
time, uh, failures happen when they're majority of the time are not really anticipated, right? So these are
Exactly.
those scenarios which are not really, you
Yeah.
haven't really thought about.
Yeah.
So what you really, the other thing that I encourage people always is, when we are doing
Hmm.
something new, think about what can go wrong, and then say, okay, let's ring fence how much damage can happen, and then build a risk tolerance and say, okay, I'm prepared to lose this much money. So if you go and if you're going to gamble and you're putting your money in a slot machine, say that, okay, I'm prepared to lose $10. I mean, that's
Right. Yeah.
and if I lose $10,
Yeah.
that's fine. But if I lose, more than 10, I really need to then reassess
Yeah.
that if this is the right thing for me to do, right? So
Right.
that's in general. If some, I want people to have this clarity of mind that when we are doing something, we have, because we are in business of money, uh,
Hmm.
and so when we make mistakes, consequences can be very big. So you have to
Right.
think this through, especially in our line of work. And then,
Hmm.
but if something goes wrong, I tell my team that if there is bad news and good news, tell me the bad news first.
Right.
And
That
if
takes courage.
exactly, and
Yeah.
then and
Yeah.
if you don't uh, share
Hmm.
the bad news, it's guaranteed that there will be very bad consequences for you. But if it is an honest
Hmm.
mistake, I'm sure we can figure out a way where we
Yeah.
can deal with it and then move forward. So smart people, when they
Right.
make a mistake, they
Hmm.
immediately uh, transparently admit it, and then come up simultaneously with a plan to build trust, that how they will make sure
Yeah.
that this doesn't happen again.
Right. Perfect. That's very, very well put, I must say. And also, Mudassar, talking about success, it's a very subjective thing. It might look different things for different people. So, what is your definition of success?
I think that's a very uh, difficult question, but I would say that if you can sleep at night uh, with a clean conscience, and you get to work on things that you really enjoy, and you feel and you feel that your work is making a positive impact to the world, uh, and it and your work is allowing you to live a balanced life, and that balance that works for you, a balance that allows you to be in harmony with, be it whatever works for you, be it spiritually, be it physically, uh,
Right.
um, and and meet your objectives that you have set for your life in terms of your personal financial goals, or your family's financial goals, and whatever goals you have set for them. I think if all of this can happen, that sounds like a pretty successful life. And and
Right.
uh, and equally important would be that if, like I said, the impact that you're having on the world, the purpose of your work is fulfilling, where you see that there are people benefiting from the work that you do, not only inside
Right.
your organization but outside also. That would
Right.
be definition
Perfect.
of
Yeah.
success.
Interesting. Very interesting. And now that we're reaching the end of our conversation with Asir, we'll finish off with the last question here. That as a leader, how or what would be your 2 cents for overcoming imposter syndrome?
You know, authenticity, this is the age of authenticity, right? So
Right.
people see through uh, people who are fake or imposters. People see through you, and it is not going to
Hmm.
work. And I think being comfortable in your own skin
Hmm.
uh, is is just it makes your life so much more easier, because you don't have to worry too much about sounding a certain way or looking a certain way. You're
Right.
comfortable with who you are, and this is who you really are. So
Yeah.
I think the people will see through you
Hmm.
very soon. One of my mentors told me that, look, the good and bad work, and or good or bad people, regardless of whatever they are, over a period of time, are
Yeah.
exposed to the whole world, right? So who you really are,
Absolutely. Yeah.
eventually, uh, the world will see it. So I think this a lot of time people think from this, a lot of this exposure from that you can get on social media, or you can get
Hmm.
this. All this is the age of influencers and all of these people who create like this persona. Uh,
Right.
I think people who are really, who are even in this line of business, who people who are really bringing authentic new
Hmm.
insights and new value, new content, are the ones who really make it. And people who are
Hmm.
just trying to be someone and trying to join the rat race are not the ones who will succeed even in this. So
Right.
that's my view on this.
And with that, we'll close the conversation. Thank you so much once again for being here with us, Mudassir. It was indeed a very meaningful and a thoughtful conversation. And as far as our audience are concerned, if you like the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and pass it around to your friends and family. Until the next episode rolls out, do check us out on other streaming platforms and take care of yourself. And we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.